Welcome, friends, and welcome to this Diocese of California first session of our Stewardship series for 2021. Tonight's conversation is about evaluating your pledge campaign. We'll be meeting every fourth Thursday of the month from now through the end of the year to talk about all things stewardship and fundraising. And I'm really looking forward to being with you on that. My name is Davey Gerhard, and I'm the Director of Development for the diocese. That means that I work in fundraising, development, planned giving, stewardship, events, all for the diocese. And it is a great joy and a great fun to be a part of this work. Thank you so much for giving me this work to do. I appreciate it every day. And it's a real delight. I've met almost all of you, but there are a few I don't know. And since this is a cohort that I hope will develop, grow, continue throughout the year, I'm going to ask us to very quickly just introduce ourselves with your name and your congregation so that we can all know each other. And we'll do this each session so that we can keep acquainted. By way of introduction or by continuation, I'll say that this is being recorded. I've hit the record button. You can see it flashing up in the top of your screen. I hope that that's all right with you. If you would rather not have your face show up on something that we will share within the diocese, you might want to switch off your camera or switch it on and off as you like. I just wanted to let you know that we are recording. So how to introduce ourselves. I think I will call on you and ask you to introduce yourself because we're all in a different order on our screen. I was going to say let's go around in a circle, but we can't really do that. So Michelle, who are you?
So I'm Michelle Rackison. I'm the CFO of the diocese.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Stephen Siproff.
Thank you, Stephen Siptroth. I'm a field education student at Holy Innocents and a member of St. Stephen's in Orinda.
Great, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Davey.
Nancy, will you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Nancy Oliver from St. Peter's in Redwood City. And I'm just a lay person, don't have anything to do with anybody, any clergy or anything, but I did pretty well help with our stewardship campaign this year.
Thanks, Nancy. You're not just a layperson, you are a layperson, and that's a great thing. John Sutton.
Hey, everybody. I'm John Sutton. I'm the rector at St. Anselm's in Lafayette. Good to be with y'all.
Welcome. Diane.
I'm Diane Granlund. I'm the stewardship chair at Holy Cross in Castro Valley.
Great. Thank you for being here. Kathy.
I am Kathy Maxwell, and I'm a very new member of the Bishops Committee at St. Columba's in Inverness. And you may not see me each month because our Bishops Committee divided up who can go to different meetings. And I said I could come to this one this evening. So thanks for letting me be here.
Well, you chose the best one. So thank you, Kathy. Thanks for being here. Lisi.
Hi, I'm Lisi Taggart, and I am the manager of all things money at St. Gregory's in San Francisco.
Thank you for your work there. Paul.
Yeah, I'm Paul Whitke. I'm chair of the Stewardship Commission for St. Anselm's in Lafayette with Father John Sutton.
Welcome. Looks like you're climbing Half Dome too, so congratulations there. Lori.
Hi, I'm Lori Walton. I'm the rector of St. James in Fremont.
Thanks for being here, Lori. Good to see you. Nicole.
Hi, I'm Nicole, and I'm on the Stewardship Committee at St. Aidan's in San Francisco.
Good to see you, Nicole. Thank you for your work on the Stewardship Committee. Beautiful, hard work, I know. Maria.
Hi there, I'm Maria Yelm, and I'm a parishioner at St. Stephen's, and I just went on the vestry there and am now heading up stewardship.
Isn't that the way it works? You just joined vestry and they put you in charge of stewardship.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm turning my camera off because I'm eating dinner. So excuse me.
Bon appetit. Thank you for being here. Sylvia.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Ma. I'm the senior warden at St. James, Fremont.
Welcome. And Mike, we have you here, but not on cam. There you are.
Yeah, hi, I'm Mike Scrutton. I'm a lay member of St. James in Fremont as well. I'm also the stewardship secretary, which is a mouthful.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here. I think that's who we have this evening. It's almost 10 minutes into our time. I see a couple other folks, but we will gather, and as more folks come in, I will be remembering to admit them. I'm going to be sharing my screen and walking through some slides tonight, and I will stop every few slides to ask for some questions so that we can all catch up, and then we'll move on, and there will be time at the end also to ask any questions that you might have about the content or anything else. It'll be a little difficult for me to monitor chat, slides, and talk all at the same time. That's one skill too many. So if you do put something into the chat, I'm gonna have to come and read it later. So if you would kind of save it for the question time every few slides, that would be great. But if you are sharing a resource that you want everyone to see, pop it into the chat, and then everyone will be able to get it there if it's a website or a best practice that you like to share. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you now. All right, welcome. Welcome to Evaluating Your Pledge Campaign. We're starting our series with this particular conversation because often we finish up our campaigns whenever we do. Some of us finish them in November, and some congregations are just beginning them now. They do a winter or early spring campaign. But what we seldom do is pull up at the end and say, what just happened here? What did we do? What did we learn? What might we do better? How might we learn in the future from this? So I'm presenting this early in the year to get us in the habit of being able to think about what happens in a stewardship campaign and how we stay in touch with each other and help our committee honor the good work that it's done and take some lessons forward. So tonight, what I hope that we will learn together is what to think and learn about the numbers. So we'll be talking about how much we raised, how the participation was, and other number related things, how we can learn from that and what that reveals to us about our congregations. We'll talk about asking the right questions of your stewardship committee, some reflecting questions that helps us understand how people felt about the campaign, how it went, how it performed. So we'll be looking not just at performance, but also at the experience of your campaign. And then we'll end with 4 simple tips on how to keep stewardship formation going all year round in your congregation. We begin with gratitude, where all things begin when we're talking about God. And gratitude isn't always the first place that we think of, is it? It needs practice, it needs daily repetition in order to become a discipline. But it's an invitation that we receive and extend to others when we thank people, when we are grateful, when we receive the gratitude. We learn so much about our relationship, and it sets the foundation for how we engage with the world around us, a grateful heart. And it's a way of life. When we practice gratitude, when we practice being thankful and receiving thanks, and I say that as both sides, right? So it's sometimes difficult to receive gratitude from people about things that we've done that have inspired them or helped them. It seems also difficult sometimes to do the hard work of thanking and recognizing everyone. So I put it as a practice for us to think about, and certainly when we talk about stewardship, it's where we begin. Every campaign for raising funds in your congregation should start with gratitude. It's the foundation. We thank people for their participation. We thank people for volunteering. Many of you identified yourselves as members of the Stewardship Committee. That's hard work. And there are many people who work in fundraising and stewardship in our congregations that are identified and unidentified, seen and unseen. So we thank our volunteers. We thank people for their gifts of time, talent, and treasure. We want to make sure that people feel acknowledged and thanked. And thank people for the things that they do in their lives that are inspired by what they learned in church, formed by the Gospels, formed by our theology and our communal life, but that they may practice on their own, either through the jobs that they have, the way they raise their family, the education that they pursue, the nonprofits or community organizations that they support. Those are all things that we should recognize that they're doing in their lives and in the world around them. When we think about how interconnected we are and how grateful we can be for all of that work together, it's a beautiful way to represent our stewardship holistically. Stewardship of the world, stewardship of each other. So as you begin your campaign with gratitude, you should end your campaign with gratitude as well. One of my beliefs about fundraising is that no matter the size of your congregation, you should write a handwritten note to everyone who participated, even those who did not pledge or make a gift. Now, why do I say that? Why should they get a thank you? Well, because they participated hopefully in some way. Maybe they prayed for the campaign, maybe they showed up, maybe they decided to not be able to make a pledge, but they're going to put it in the plate instead, and they haven't told you that yet. Maybe the thank you will inspire them to make a pledge or to make a gift. But everyone should receive a note at the end of the campaign. They don't all have to come from the clergy. I think we should think about those notes being written from committee members or vestry members. Divide up the work, especially if there's a lot of them to write. Hopefully there are a lot of them to write. It is nice when it comes from the clergy because people like to be acknowledged, but I don't think that it's absolutely essential. I think the important thing is being thanked. I really do want to say that everyone who attends your church participates in your stewardship, and they may not know how to express it. They may not have expressed it the way you wanted them to, either in the size of their gift or in the frequency or in making a pledge at all. But let's believe that they did participate and that they have some goodwill about that and think through that and care about that. I wonder from you all what experiences you've had, and if you just want to chime in, I can only see a limited number of people on my screen, so just speak and speak up. And if you've had experience writing thank you notes, receiving thank you notes from a campaign, how that's been for you, or why you've done it, or why you haven't done it.
Davey, this is Lori. Hi. So in our congregation, we send handwritten thank you notes to everybody who makes a pledge. I'm wondering what a note might say if they didn't make a pledge. Do you have ideas about that?
Yeah, it might say, thank you for being a part of our community. Thank you for your prayers and support. One of the things that I recommend is that we don't put financial data or even a reference to a financial gift in the thank you note. It's a gratitude for participating. They'll get a pledge statement or a letter confirming their pledge from the treasurer or the pledge secretary, perhaps. but the note should really just be thank you. And if we can separate it from the actual dollar, then I think it feels something more resonant about why we are asking or thanking them for their participation. So those are a couple of thoughts.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is Lacey chiming in from St. Gregory's. Our situation is a little different, and I don't know if anybody else in the diocese does it this way, but we don't do an annual campaign. We have a rolling pledge drive where we essentially solicit about 10% of the congregation each month. And it keeps our pledge rolls a little more up to date, a little livelier. It's worked really well for us over the last 15 years. But one of the things that we do in the month that people get solicited, so one nice thing about it is that there, say 20 people in a month as opposed to your whole congregation that you have to handle, which makes it a little easier to think about each person. Our goal in writing the notes of thanks is to say essentially, we see you, we know you, and you're a valuable part of our congregation. So what we try to do is make sure that the note says something, and we do say thank you for your pledge. We don't say, your pledge of so many dollars, but we say thank you for your pledge, and also thank you for teaching Sunday school, or thank you for your prayerful presence in worship or something. Having fewer to do at a time really helps us spend the minute. And in those cases where we can't think of something to say, then we know that we have some, I'll call it in-reach to do, of getting to know a congregant that we don't know as well as we should. So then we kind of set ourselves the goal of, okay, somebody take this person out to coffee, get to know this person, invite this person into a deeper engagement, so it becomes part of a more holistic engagement with the person at the level of how does this person fit into the congregation.
That's great, Lacey. I mean, what a process. I love it. How many people are working on your stewardship efforts at St. Gregory's?
5 or 6 of us.
Great.
Back in the day when we used to do every member visits, there were a lot more. We don't do those. I wish we still did them. And then we engaged everybody in the congregation in doing that. But I would say that, it's 5 or 6. Now, we don't do handwritten notes. Our congregation, most of them don't like getting mail. They don't see it, they don't find it, they lose it. They would much rather be communicated with by email.
Oh, sure.
So that makes it a little easier.
Mm-hmm.
Because the nature of an email is different from the nature of a handwritten note.
Absolutely. Well, I love that practice, and I like it. I'm a modern guy too, so I understand handwritten notes might mean personally written emails as well. They can be more meaningful, especially to people who prefer to receive their notice that way. So I get that. I'm really interested in St. Gregory's model, so thank you for sharing that. That's fascinating, and what a way to think about it. What a way to think about year-round stewardship. All right, let's
Davey?
move on. Yes.
Davey, I would like to, from Lacey, that was very interesting. Thank you for sharing it. Is there any pros or cons? When obviously you mentioned the positive attributes of splitting up the drive into each month and only 10%, and it seems to balance out the workload and such. But is there any negative ramifications you've noticed by doing it that way?
The main thing, and I wouldn't say it's a negative ramification, but it does require, we don't build our budget off of our pledge base. We build our budget off of sort of prior year giving, and ratchet it up, 3-5%, whatever we think is reasonable. Our congregation is big enough that we have found over time that that's the more accurate way for us to budget. We also have people coming in and moving away, as I'm sure all your congregations do too. But the biggest requirement that we had to kind of wrap our brains around was say, we don't budget off our pledge base. And that's really, really difficult to, that was a difficult cultural change for us. As far as negatives, we don't have the opportunity for a wonderful, and I'm thinking back to the church I grew up in, for a wonderful end of campaign liturgical, exciting thing where we walk down. Of course, we don't have a center aisle or pew, where you walk down the center aisle and you drop the pledge cards on the table and you bless that. So we have struggled over time with a liturgical way to recognize the gifts that people make, and how to express that within the public life of the church, and not just the private interaction between the stewardship, the people who are working on stewardship, which includes our rector. So what it does is it makes it really difficult to have that. On the other hand, it makes it really much easier to require of our preachers. Everybody preaches on stewardship, so it really supports having a year-round consciousness of generosity and stewardship and gratitude. That's what I can think of off the top of my head. If something else jumps in, I'll get back with you, Paul, individually.
Thanks, Lacey, and thanks, Paul, for that question. This is a great gratitude practice, and I look forward to hearing from it more. Maybe you all can teach us your stewardship philosophy and your model. It can be a future event for us to all learn from what you're doing. So thank you. I'm going to move us on a little bit, and if you have lingering questions about gratitude, we can come back and answer them in a little bit. I want to talk about the numbers. So we need to always look at a campaign when it's done and give it some comparatives. Talk about what we've done and what we hope to do. So obviously a question that we want to look at is what's our total and how does it compare with what we've done in the past? And what's the percentage change from what it has been? And I think this is really important to know, because sometimes just numbers on their own mean less than knowing, well, that's a 3% increase or a 15% increase. It's really helpful to know that. So take that extra step to calculate the percentage. But then equally important as the amount raised is the participation. So how many cards or pledges or promises, we all use very different words, and that's fine. We don't have to have one size fits all. But how many cards or pledges were returned? And how does that compare with last year, both in percentages and in numbers? So it's good to know from year to year how people are responding. Are you going up or down in the number of pledging units, we might say? So how many people increased their donation from last year? This is good to know so that some of you who may be fundraisers know that this is a question that we always want to know. So it's great when people answer, and it's wonderful to know that they've increased. And maybe that could beg the question, well, why? Did your income change? Are you more committed? Do you just feel our message more? We want to know some questions about when people increase. We want to thank them and don't burden them with questions, accept it graciously. But sometimes knowing how many people increased and why is really important. But also important to know is when people decrease their giving. This could be an indication that there's a pastoral conversation to have. Maybe something is going on in the family. Maybe you already know it. There's been an income change or a health change or some other family status change that would indicate that they're giving less. It could be something they haven't voiced yet. Episcopalians, like many humans, are sometimes passive aggressive and might make a determination about their pledge based on their emotion of the congregation and the direction that things are going, or any number of things. So it's a chance when someone increases or decreases, particularly dramatically, to have a chat with them and know why that is, and to pay attention to it. And then, of course, who's staying the same? Later on this year, we're going to do a whole workshop just on addressing the pledge plateau, what to do with those donor cards that come in year after year at the same amount when you know that people's lives may be changing, and that they may have a way to increase their giving. So if they're just giving by routine, same as last year, that's good to know. It's money that the church can count on. But we'd like to know perhaps why that is, and if there's something we could be doing to change that amount. Finally, if you implemented electronic giving, did that increase the amount that you were able to collect online or collect in general? So that's to say, if, and this is particularly interesting for many of our congregations who before 2020 maybe hadn't implemented virtual offering plates or a way to collect money online. If you did that, did it noticeably increase the amount you were able to collect in income this year or in pledges? So this is really important. Electronic giving it's just one more way that people can engage. So what do the numbers teach us? Well, of course, they are a practical measure of our expected revenue. And while I know that there are several congregations in our diocese that don't set a budget based on the pledge, many do. And so many want to run a fall campaign so that their treasurers and finance committee can look at the numbers and set next year's budget. There are practical things that come out of wanting to know our pledge numbers. They're a small window into the capacity and generosity of our members. And I say a small window because numbers are helpful. They tell us one story. They don't tell us the whole story. So you don't know, for example, if they could be making a much larger gift just based on their donation history, or if they're giving you a disproportionately large gift for their charitable work. Without knowing their full story, we just know it's a small window into who they are and why they are, what their capacity for giving is. And of course, it's also part of the way we measure how people are being impacted or adopting our mission. Again, this goes to how people feel about the community and how people feel about the work that they're doing. And this is particularly interesting. We'll get into this later in the year in some of our other sessions when we talk about generational differences in fundraising. Our mature or our late boomers, they give to institutions, which is not to say that they don't care about metrics as well, they do. But they are more likely to give to an institution because it's the institution. They trust the institution, they care about it, it's what they've done. But some of our younger donors or our new pledgers, they are giving because they feel impact. They want to see the results of what you're doing and how you're making your giving known and giving impact into your community. So knowing the measure or adoption of mission is one of the things we learn from looking at the numbers. They don't tell the whole story though. So because of that, we're going to go into some other things that we ask and think about when it comes to our pledge campaigns. Just a few more notes about numbers. It's not enough just to report them. We often will, at the dedication Sunday, we might read off the pledge cards or make a note and say, we've received X pledge cards and increased by this much, and it's great and hooray. But then later we need to really analyze them, as I've suggested, really take a look and see who's doing what and why. Know what the trends are. Look at 3 years of giving so you can say, this person is moving in this direction, or maybe this person is moving in a downward direction and they might need some outreach, which isn't to say the only time we reach out to people is when they give less, but it's a way to know what, or ask questions, what's going on. When we look at people over time and when we look at gifts over time, we know better how to steward them and how to respond to them. So again, I just want to say that these are opportunities for you to have deeper conversations from time to time about it. And I liked what Lisi said earlier about if you don't know enough about a person to understand what their giving patterns are, it's a good indication that there's an opportunity for some inreach. There's an opportunity for some relationship building, some one-on-one conversations. People often tell us why they do what they do, but when they don't, it's an opportunity to ask deeper questions. I wonder if there are any questions about numbers and why we ask the questions about numbers that we do and what their value is, or if you have some things to share about that before we move on to feelings and reflections.
Hi, Davey. I have a thought here on the numbers. I noticed that we evaluated our numbers really just individual to individual, and what you said earlier resonated with me about different generational patterns of giving. And I went online and I read a report about that from several years ago, but I bet it still pretty much holds true. And I think that's useful for us to read about, because one thing I read was that the millennial generation, the younger generation, they're actually giving a higher percentage of their income.
Wow.
And I think that the folks that are on stewardship committee aren't necessarily aware of that, and they're evaluating folks similarly. And that can, even if it's not stated, it can get through and be potentially discouraging. So I just thought that was an interesting learning.
That's a very interesting learning, and thank you for bringing it up. Thank you for also asking the question in your committee and doing the research and thinking about it, and for mentioning it here. You're absolutely right. We tend not to anticipate great gifts from millennials because we think, well, they don't have a lot of money to give. You know what? They are spending more money than most of our other, they're our largest generation right now. They are spending a lot. They are active. They are also likely to be making online gifts and doing that. So while they may not make the largest gifts in your congregation by far, they are making gifts that for them are sacrificial, important gifts. They believe in the causes that they support. And that's something that is really important about that generation to know. Because if we treat those donations now with respect and expect greatness from them as their incomes increase, as their influence in society increases, their giving patterns will continue to help our congregations. And as we're looking at a big demographic change, it's really important to cultivate that young generation of donors. It is truly the future of our church. Thank you for bringing it up.
I have a question, Davey. It's Lisi again, who's talking too much tonight. When you're saying individual giving should trend up year to year, I have a real problem with that because it keeps us from doing real planning. Our congregation, for the first time in its history, is developing a cadre of older members, and we're facing, how do we respectfully handle when our congregants retire and have to reduce their gifts? There's so much shame and so much embarrassment about a need to not only level off, but maybe drastically cut a pledge because, you know, their life circumstances have changed. So can you talk to me a little more about just the statement individual giving should trend up year to year?
Yeah, well, individual giving should trend up, but that doesn't mean that every individual should give more. So that's to say, your giving, individual giving as a whole, needs to increase with the expenses or the expectations of your community. But there are some people who, as you explain, won't be able to do that, which means you need to fill in from other people, whether that's new member growth or reaching into people who are plateaued for a while and start to try to get them to move, or as we talked about, looking at younger generations who are at a different place in their earning potential to be able to maximize their commitment to financial stewardship in the church. Being able to look at those questions is really important. And you bring up a beautiful pastoral point about how do we help people who leave their earning potential and move into their savings to feel honored and honorable about the gifts that they continue to make. And I think that we have an opportunity to really do some good theological and pastoral work as a church about making that known and making people feel good about the place that they're in. They've worked hard for their lives and they deserve to retire. And so making them feel honored in that is really important. I also say that, and this is a plug, Lisa, you and I are working on a planned gift right now for St. Gregory's. So this is a plug for planned giving. I see Lori on this call as well, who has 50% of her congregation, St. James in Fremont, having made some sort of planned giving commitment to her congregation, which is amazing. Planned giving is a way that folks can continue, in many cases, to get a lifetime income stream, which contributes to their retirement and still be able to leave a lovely gift to the church. So for a few years, while their giving may taper off, then it comes back to the church in a different way, in a different honorable way. And I'll share one more anecdote. It's one of my very favorite stories about this diocese, which is, we have a family, a faithful family of one of our congregations in San Francisco that for decades have been making a weekly gift both to the congregation and to a little endowment to replace their giving when they're no longer able to make it. And they've been doing this as a habit, just a little bit at a time for more than 40 years. And so as the person who just had to give them their statement of how their endowment is doing, I will say it's enormous. It has grown to a huge sum of money, which their congregation will get when they can no longer make a gift. And it was a habit that they began in their young family days and continue now. It's such a simple idea that is beautiful, and they kept it as a discipline. When we can tell those sorts of stories and when we can encourage planned giving, it helps us give honor to folks who are transitioning into a different place in their ability to give current gifts to the church. Thank you for your question, Lucy.
Thanks for your explanation. You helped me see it in a different way. That's helpful.
Davey, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
What was the vehicle? What were they giving to exactly at this endowment? Was it in the diocese or something outside that then comes to the diocese?
Yeah, they set up an endowment So when they set up an endowment with the diocese, the threshold for setting up an endowment was smaller. These days, you have to have a minimum of 100,000 to set up an endowment, but it was different 40 years ago. And so they set it up with a very small amount and just pitched into it, literally pitched into an endowment the diocese manages on their behalf. It's a part of the diocesan endowment, which is earmarked for that congregation. But that family contributes to it, and so we can report on it. Just taking it out of the rest of the endowment, we can see how it's performing.
Can people do that on behalf of a parish? Could I set up oh, they can. I didn't even know that. Okay.
Yep. These days, as I said, it takes a larger threshold to begin an endowment gift, but you can make an endowment. The diocese will manage it. The diocesan endowment is managed with the DFM, the Episcopal Church endowment as a whole. So it's invested very soundly with socially responsible metrics.
Maybe at what point in time is that actually committed to the diocese? Is that at the time it's set up, or the payments, or at some other point in time?
Committed as in when? I'm sorry.
Irretrievable for a family if they fell into hard times and they have any recourse or something on the. It's kind of like a retirement plan, a 401k. You can take money out for emergencies.
Yeah, that's where this is different, right? It's not a retirement plan. It was a gift that they made. So they made the gift, and it belongs to really the congregation. I suppose if they really wanted to have a conversation with us about needing it or taking it out, it would be difficult. I'm not sure even what policy we have that would govern that. That's a good question, but it's not like a retirement plan where you sort of account for it in a different way and take it out. They made this gift with the intention of never having to need it for anything, and it goes to their congregation by their request when they pass on. Great, thank you for your questions. Let's move into some of the other things that we analyze when we look at our campaigns, the feelings. So one of the questions I think we should ask our committee and perhaps ask of our congregation is, how did you feel about the information you received when you were asked to make a gift? Whether that's a pledge or a one-time gift, if you gave out brochures or you sent a letter or you created a narrative budget or a website, how did people feel about what you sent? Were they inspired? Were they well informed? Did they feel like they knew what you were asking of them and what the church was doing with that money that you were asking for? Did it have the right tone for your congregation? And this is to say, I don't think it's happened in our diocese, but I've spoken with some congregations who maybe went to a marketing firm and had their collateral designed with pictures and that didn't represent them, or with words or tones or stories that felt impersonal. And then all of a sudden it fell flat when it came into their congregation, and no wonder. So a question to ask is, are you representing the tone and the feelings, the charism of your congregation in the way you describe your work and in how you create your materials? Some congregations are more corporate feeling and more formal, and some are more down home and family. And all of those are good. They are who you are. Just know how your people are used to hearing information and create your materials to be like that. Was there a sense of joy and fun in fundraising? This is absolutely essential. If the leadership, the vestry, the clergy, the stewardship committee feel like it's a burden, or they look like they're tired even when they are, it becomes difficult to communicate the excitement of a campaign. And yeah, maybe we all roll our eyes a little bit when the campaign comes around and we have to be enthusiastic about fundraising. It's not perhaps our favorite thing or the reason that we joined a church. But there are stories to be told. There are celebrations to have. There's a great sense of community that can come from a campaign. So make sure there's joy. Did the program run for the right length of time? This is a really important question, and it differs from congregation to congregation. Some congregations like a very short, tight campaign. They want to get it done, and they talk about it in 1 or 2 or 3 Sundays, or maybe just a letter and a Sunday. Some congregations do it quickly. Others spend 4 or 6 weeks doing a campaign, and they're more methodical about it. Maybe they do more face-to-face work, and so it needs to take time because you have to schedule all those people for all those conversations. Whatever it is, make certain that it fits the community and that people don't feel rushed. Sometimes if a campaign is too short, not everybody feels like they got a chance to hear about it or participate. If you missed that Sunday, you might not have heard the great stewardship sermon. And so, so maybe, extending it a little is helpful. But there runs the risk of going too long too, right? And having people feel like, why are we still doing this? It's been forever. I make a little plug here to resist doing any sort of week by week notification of how a campaign is doing. That's to say, don't have a thermometer or a dial or anything like that. It can be very, while it's great when it's going well, it can really stymie giving when it feels like it's stagnant. And if there are some weeks when no gifts come in and you're trying to like mark it on the board and nothing has come in, it makes it feel flat. So I don't want you to plan for failure and say that, but I also want to caution you against running the kind of campaign that feels like it's dragging. You don't want that. You want a sense of joy and a sense of momentum. Here's a question that I think we always need to ask when we talk about our pledge campaigns or our fundraising in church. Did we talk more about the reasons that we give, our gospel mandate to share and to be generous, or did we talk more about bills? Did we talk about why we have to raise the money, or was there a sense of sort of fear in our fundraising? So please talk more about the things that inspire us, the gospel. And there are so many beautiful stewardship passages to preach on and to talk about. And was the focus more on the mission or was it on the budget? So that's to say, did you talk about why you needed to raise money for utilities and salaries? Or did you talk about what those utilities and salaries do in the community? Like feeding people, like making backpacks for kids, like serving seniors, like all the things that you do in your community. When your stewardship campaigns are about the mission and not about the budget, they are exciting, they're dynamic, and they help people understand how to participate and why. So what do feelings teach us? What does understanding feelings when it comes to a fundraising campaign teach us? So why ask these questions? Well, so just as I said, money and numbers are a little window into understanding how people connect with the mission. Our feelings, when we ask people, how did you experience the campaign? Was it joyful? Did you feel hopeful? Did it inspire generosity? Did it fall flat? Did you not understand what we were saying? It helps us know how they connected with the mission and how we presented it. If the campaign didn't feel like it was fun, then it's time to look at your messaging. Really, it is. Budgets, it's about more than the bill. Help people understand always what the mission is and what the impact of your mission is. We'll be doing a session later this year on creating compelling case materials, where we really dig deep into how do you develop a mission impact case for giving in your congregation? How do you talk about the work, the people that you're serving, and that sense of joy? So we'll be going into a lot more detail this year about that. And so finally, if members didn't respond as you'd hoped, it might be the approach and not the mission and not the budget. It may also be the mission or the budget. There may be other things going on. But one of the first places to look is, how did we approach people? How did they feel about the messaging? And what went on there? When you're looking at the performance of a campaign, think about all of the messaging that went into it and how people responded. People are emotional and they make emotional decisions about giving. We also want people to reflect. Fundraising and stewardship is a time, because we're talking about mission, it's a time to reflect on our own stuff and our own feelings about generosity in the world. So I want our campaign committees to look at a campaign and understand, well, what went right? What went wrong? What should we make sure that we do next year? So ask that of your stewardship committee. Make sure that they understand how to improve it. There's always something to improve, always something to change. What do you want to make sure that you do next year, and what do you want to make sure that you don't do next year? So maybe you realized, aha, we should have had more testimonials, or when we told that story, people didn't seem to respond well to it. Know and be able to judge the reaction that you're getting. What are the goals that you might set for next year's stewardship program? And this is different from the goals that you may have for the congregation. We'll talk later on this year about goal setting and budgets and how you can do some work around that. But really, this is about what do you want your fundraising program to be? So you might say, well, let's add another Sunday, or let's do some more preaching, or let's add a book study this year that is in the middle of the year that has nothing to do with the pledge campaign. Or you may say, let's do some outreach this year. Let's get to know 5 more people each on our stewardship committee, or commit to having conversations with them. Develop some goals for outreach and keeping in touch with folks. Finally, check in with your committee. After your campaign, do they feel that they were respected and loved and welcomed? Do they feel disheartened? Do they feel exhausted? Do they feel energized and ready to go? How your committee feels is a good way to understand how they interacted with your congregation. And if their congregation just merely tolerated them, or if they welcomed them openly, it tells you some things about your messaging and about the generosity that people are feeling in your congregation about that. So when your campaign is done and you've folded up the chairs or closed your virtual Zoom celebration, make sure that you bring your committee back together for at least one meeting and ask all of the questions that we've talked about today. Follow up, of course, with the gifts that haven't yet come in, things you were expecting, pledge cards that people said, I put it in the mail and it hasn't arrived yet. Follow up. We leave a lot of pledges on the table, as it were, because we're either afraid to follow up sometimes, or we forget about it. January and February comes and then we're off in the church here doing other things. We forget sometimes to circle back around to those folks who maybe just really forgot to send in their pledge materials and are waiting for an email or a call and would appreciate that. Thank everyone who participated. Thank them for their time, and thank them for what they've done and for what they will do and for their own giving. So please make sure that you thank them. And then do that analysis. Understand where you succeeded, where you met expectations, where you might do better. Really look at the analysis of your gifts. Before we move into pastoral conversations, let's talk about feelings. Let's talk about the numbers. Let's talk about any of the questions that we talked about. Do you have any questions or comments or stories from your own experience that you would like to share with us? We're hitting that 8 o'clock hour, aren't we? I'll move on to pastoral questions, and then maybe it'll jog your mind to think of any other questions that you have. As I said earlier in the session, when you are looking at the trends and you notice something that seems off, either with the trend as a whole or with individuals, I suggest that it's the time to have some pastoral conversations about it. And these pastoral conversations, some of them may be with the clergy and may be better suited for clergy. But since we're talking about money, and some clergy and some communities have feelings about the clergy participating in conversations about money, there can be other people who are designated to have these conversations. It could be members of the stewardship committee or vestry, people who are trusted. That's your stuff in your community. You know what that work is like. But some questions that you might ask pastorally when you've noticed that there's something different about somebody's giving history. Ask them something positive that they love or appreciate about the church. Some appreciative inquiry type questions. What program or ministry at our church means the most to you? Get them talking about it and inspire their generosity. Why did you make a decision to support or not to support the church this year? This is a direct question. But when you are open to the answer and you're open and actively listening and ready to hear, they may share some really beautiful, deep stuff with you. It could be about the community. It could be about themselves. I remind people whenever we're talking about money and in a church context, that you're not just talking about money. You're talking about people's joys, their fears, their securities, their insecurities, their retirement hopes, their children's education. All the things that go into money and us are things that you might get an answer about when you ask this question. It's a direct question to ask, but if you're comfortable and it's the right time, it's a good question. Here's a question that doesn't invite something negative. You don't want people to list off all their complaints, but it's in that appreciative inquiry vein. What do you think we should be focusing on as a congregation? Maybe there's some work in the community that you've noticed that needs to be done. Where should the church invest its time? This is a fact-finding mission. Are we doing the work that our community wants us to do? And this is important, especially when we have ministries in neighborhoods that have changed over time and we're still doing the same ministry. Maybe the community has changed. It no longer needs, maybe it used to have lots of kids, so you needed a tutoring program or an after-school program, but now it's more retirees and their grandchildren are doing that work in other communities. Do you still need to offer this? And maybe there are other things to do. This is a place to help your members say what's being done in the community that we might plug into. Maybe they volunteer at a nonprofit and they want to bring that work to your congregation in a way. Maybe they do habitat cleanups or build houses, or maybe they, who knows? And they could bring some ideas to you in this moment and re-engage their generosity and their creativity. Here's a question that might come up in a pastoral conversation, and it's about what do you want out of your life? What are your goals and your struggles, either financially, professionally, as a family, but not just so I can give you all of my advice and my self-help, but how can the church support you in that work? Do you need prayers? Do you need connections? We have networks that we can connect you to. Do you need direct resources? Maybe people will tell you about deeper things that are going on that that you say we have some resources to help with that. This is the kind of question that helps people and both of you in that conversation share deeply in that moment and helps the church connect where people need their support and love. And finally, I would say that if you have the ability to ask this question and somebody says, I'm not going to give this year, and they've given you all the reasons, you might say, is this on the table for another year? Can we come back around someday and talk about this? And that's to let people know that the door is always open. And it's to remind you that the door is always open too, right? We can always come back to this. Nothing is final. We're not saying no forever. And we don't think that you just said no forever. We're going to keep asking if it's allowed, if it's permitted. There are some people who will say, don't ever ask me. I'm going to always put it in the plate and I don't want you to talk to me about my giving. Okay, heard you, respect you. Remind me of that if I ever come close again to that question. But if it's appropriate, ask them if they would be willing in the future to make a gift. Any questions on questions before we move on? Have any of you had these kinds of pastoral conversations or questions? Have they gone well? Have they not gone well? Would you consider doing them?
We use the question, your second question there, a lot, although we don't ask it as a why question, we ask it as a how question. How did you make the decision? How do you go about making decisions about money? That ends up feeling less like a challenge to them. And it's a fabulous question to elicit people's values or people's priorities or just the way they think about decision making around money.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Oh, I like your question even better. How? It invites yet a deeper level of that question. So I think, how did you make this decision? You're really asking them to share with you their process and their feelings. So great, thank you. You just taught us all something. Any other comments before we move on with our last couple slides? So here are a few things that you can do this year to keep the conversation of generosity going throughout the year until your next campaign. And these can be things that you do within your stewardship committee to keep your own formation together or to increase your own community. And they could be done in the whole church to do a general stewardship understanding or training. Next month, we're going to go deep into year-round stewardship practices where we take some of this formation and we go much deeper and also more practical about things you can do every month of the year about stewardship. But here are 4 things that you can do this year that are quick and easy. Offer a book study. My very, very favorite book on fundraising ever is Henry Nouwen's A Spirituality of Fundraising. I love it for many reasons. The first, that you can read it in about 15 minutes, which is a good book. It is just full of beautiful, practical, theological, with a minimum of words, he just exposes the heart of generosity and relationship. It's a beautiful book. You can buy it from Amazon or Forward Movement. And there's a workbook that's actually like thicker than the book itself, which is remarkable. A workbook that congregations can use to do a book study. So you can just buy the book or you can buy the workbook as well. and it's a beautiful guide for a book study. Another one that I like to do that is also a quick read. Charles Clowen is the planned giving officer in the Diocese of Maryland. He's 83 years old, and he's been doing this ministry for more than 60 years, and he loves it. He's just a really great voice. And so he's written this book. You can buy it from Church Publishing or Amazon. And it's just tiny sermons, quick tips on things you can be doing to cultivate generosity and stewardship in your congregation. It's a great read. Conduct a mid-year budget and mission review. So this is the second thing that I think a lot of our congregations could be doing. This is not to say have a second version of your annual meeting, but this is to say about halfway through the year when you send out your mid-year pledge statements, if that's a thing that you do, also report on the budget, report on the mission and the impact. So don't just say, here's year to date on a bunch of line items, but here's how many people we've served already, and here are the things that we're doing, and here's our plans for the rest of the year. Give people an update on the mission and their impact about halfway through the year. It's a good way to tie back into that pledge campaign that they now vaguely remember as having happened. Engage in storytelling. So this is a deeper question if you have some small groups that are meeting and you might want to get them thinking about a deep question about generosity. This exposes some real vulnerabilities in our own money theology. And it comes from a tool called the Money Autobiography, which I can share with you if you like. But this question really helps us understand that as we've grown in our lives, how has our relationship to money changed? And what do we think about it? And how do we talk about that? If you get people in small groups talking about this question, it can be a really fascinating and hard conversation too, because it's hard stuff. Finally, preach a stewardship sermon or a sermon on generosity in the middle of the year for no good reason, just because it needs to be done, and we need to be reminded of generosity and our ability to participate in generosity. These are 4 quick tips to help keep stewardship alive in the off season, if you will, and to keep us moving in that direction. Finally, I want to share with you resources from TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship. The Diocese of California is a member of TENS and has been for almost 2 decades. They provide annual pledge resources, so pledge campaign resources that you all have access to. Among the things that they give are during pledge season, weekly bulletin announcements that you can tie into the gospel and give you some theological point. There's also sort of a seasonal approach to those. So throughout the year, you can take these 300-word theological essays and use them as preaching tools or as small group tools. They all have a reflection question attached to them. So you can access this. I will, the password is there. It's also on the diocesan website. So you can go there and find out more. diocal.org/support is where you will find all of the resources for stewardship, planned giving, capital campaigns, and generosity in the diocese. That site, that part of our website has all of these webinars will be posted on it, and you'll be able to find the links and go back to it, and we'll share that with you. But that is a good URL to remember. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to invite a full conversation with you all about what we've learned today, and if there are any things that you want to share before we sign off, any questions that you might have. before we send ourselves out. Yeah.
I would add in your book list there, if you're familiar with Lynn Twist's book, The Soul of Money.
Yes.
I feel like that has some very good insights into fundraising from a place not only of the large amounts matter, but the very small amounts carry so much weight and potential. And I have found that helpful.
Yeah. Thank you, Kathy. That is a great read, and it's a good one. I have a full bibliography, which I'm happy to share. I'll email it out to everyone. There's so much on stewardship. Some of it's really good, some of it's not, and I'll try to steer you away from the ones that aren't so good. Yeah, Michelle.
So a couple of things, and thank you, Davey, for this. This was really, really wonderful. I'm a big fan of TENS, and when I was a rector, we used it faithfully and had great results. And we printed banners and did it in multiple kinds of tactile things, so that we had visual things and auditory things and video clips and a lot of different things. And so it was fabulous. One of the things that I found was really successful was that during our fall pledge campaign, which wasn't the only one, but during in the fall season, we had people come up and tell their stories, and they were people that nobody in the congregation expected to tell their story. The most successful one was when we had youth come up and talk about tithing their McDonald's income, their babysitting income, and it had a reaction amongst the youth that was amazing. And so we would get these pledges for 50 cents a month or, $25 a month. But I mean, what a great way to start. And so we were very honoring of the youth. And that was probably the most successful piece of all the people getting up and talking. And the other thing is that we always did something mid-year, and it would be summertime, because in our congregation, we were in Fresno, which in the summer bakes. And so in order to get anybody to come to church, that means you have to be at the church at 5 a.m. to start the air conditioner, right? Which cha-ching, cha-ching. And it's also the time when people go on vacation. And so we always had like a mid-year kind of reminder and, sermons. And those sermons were also given by lay people. And very successful. That's what got us through our summer and our utility bills. So I loved your presentation. I love what you said. And those are some of the things that we found very successful.
Thanks, Michelle. That mid-year check-in is, I think, a really important one. And it also catches people up. You can use it as an opportunity to get newcomers, give them pledge information. Here's what we do, here's how a budget is created in our church, and here's why we contribute. And it's a chance to incorporate new members into the pledge if you haven't already. Why wait a whole year? So good, thank you for that. I've just posted into the chat, and I will email it out to all of you, a couple of things. First of all, a reminder that we're gathering once a month for this. And if you want to sign up for the other ones, please do. I will also keep you on a list and remind you, since you attended this first one, that they're coming up. And I've also asked you to fill out a gentle survey. It's very short. And if there were things that you didn't say tonight that you would like to hear more about, it's a chance for you to say, please do some work on this, or we really love that, or whatever you want to say. In the survey, it'll help us create content for you for these sessions in the future. I'm going to, after the end of this, we will, as I said, post this video to our DioCal YouTube channel, and I will send you all out by email the link to it. I'll also send you the slides that we went through tonight, so that you can see them and be able to share them with your congregation or your stewardship committee. Some of you came as a team, some of you came as single representatives of your congregation. So to take it back and keep the learning moving, we'll do that. We will also send the slides in Spanish. Obviously, we can't send the video in Spanish. I wish we could, but we can send you the slides in Spanish so that those can be shared in our multicultural congregations as well. I will send out the survey link again, the bibliography that we spoke of, and some other tools to keep you thinking about this. Are there any other questions or comments, things you'd like to talk about on evaluating our campaigns before we close for the evening? I really, truly appreciate, Maria, you came off mute.
Yeah, I was going to say something. It's probably too big a topic for tonight because I don't even know how you start it, but maybe for future sessions. I would like to talk as a group about how the pandemic has affected response rates. I'm new to this for my church, but clearly we have been affected by the pandemic or something. And so it's not the only thing I think that affected the process, but I would love to hear sort of what's going on in other congregations. It's a big topic, so I don't think tonight's the place, but.
It's a huge topic and I think it needs to be done. Why don't I talk with our formation folks at the diocese and see about our calendar and see if we can't use this group and others in the diocese who might want to talk about this and bring us together in a conversation. It may not be a part of this series, but it may be a part of the ongoing stewardship work, because I think it warrants a fulsome discussion and participation. There are so many things that we learned in 2020 and so many things we're still learning in 2021. And just today, I've had like 3 conversations with Episcopal clergy or with church leaders, nationwide church leaders, about what does coming back look like and who's never going to come back to church and what's church going to look like, who will come back, what do we look like later, and how will that impact stewardship, church membership, growth, ministry, ideas. So this conversation is really big and lots of people are having it. So let's find a way to engage lots of voices on it. And I think it warrants a fulsome discussion. Thanks, Maria. All right, friends. Well, thank you so much for participating. Tell your friends what a great time you had and bring more of you next time. We'll keep these announcements in DioCal News and Events. We'll keep helping you register and get the word out. I will send you all of the things that I committed to sending you so that you can share this work. But truly, I appreciate your presence with us tonight. Thank you so much for the hard and beautiful work of stewardship that you do in your congregations. I know it, and I know that it's valued and respected. So thank you so much. Thank you, friends. Good night. Be well.